paranormal. It surrounds us. It's everywhere. Tonight, you will hear from the people who live and work within these highly active locations, all in the efforts to discover America's most haunted. With your host, ghost hunter and author, Dan Terry.
Good evening, boys and ghouls. I am Dan Terry, your ghost host with the most haunted. All right, I want you to take my advice here, okay? Sit down, lower the lights, close the curtains, and get ready for a good spooky tale, because the guest I have tonight is going to be amazing. Now, those of you who know me, and we've talked before, I'm sure, back in, gosh, I guess it was the late 70s, maybe, early 80s, I read the Amityville Horror, got really interested in demonology and that stuff. A friend of mine with a St. Charles ghost hunting tour that I went to college with said, "Oh, I remember you talking about this stuff, in 1981." So I got really into that. And during that time, of course, I read the Amityville Horror. I read Hostage to the Devil by Father Malachi Martin, which is an incredible book. I did read The Demonologist, which is about Ed and Lorraine Warren. Since then, I've read Beware the Night by Ralph Sarchie, who says he was trained by those two, Ed and Lorraine Warren. And I read one of their books called Graveyards. So I really kind of got into the whole thing. And what I learned from reading this stuff is I don't want nothing to do with it. I gave up any ideas of being a demonologist because those guys don't play fair. And it's like I've told you all, you've heard me tell some of the guests, this is not like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. You cannot cut a demon's head off with a sword and it dies. Those things go after your health, your family's health, your bank account, your car, your job. Everything goes to hell because they have their ways to destroy your entire life. And you can never see them. So I got away from it. But my guest tonight is Max Fruek. And Max, he is a really amazing author. He's wrote books called The Lost Tribes of Bigfoot. He's done Paranormal Apocalypse, The Flying Saucer Esoteric, The Altered States of UFOlogy. And he's got a new book out. It came out late last year, and it's called The Smurf Haunting, When Ed and Lorraine Warren Came to Town. Now, I've had several guests on the show. Specifically, here just recently, we had Richard Estep that don't have a lot of respect for the Warrens. When I was coming up, Warrens were, they were the authority, especially on demonology and ghosts, but they were it. People are they started tearing them down after Ed died. And since Lorraine passed, it's been even worse. But Maxim knows them, knew them, interviewed them, and I want to bring him up and let him tell us his part of it. And Maxim Fruek, what is the truth about the Warrens? Do they deserve the tearing down they've been getting in the last few years?
Well, first of all, Dan, thank you so much for having me on
I appreciate you coming on.
Podcast. Thank you so much, and this is a real honor, and I'm looking forward to a nice chat this evening. But let's face it, it's the way of the world. I mean, when you're accomplishing things and climbing that ladder and starting to have a reputation and acclaim, there are people that'll try to bring you down. So it happened with the Warrens, just like it happens with everybody else. I would think that with Ed and Lorraine Warren, first of all, on the positive side, they were, like you said, as you were coming up, you heard about them. When we first heard about Rosemary's Baby and, The Omen and
The Exorcist, of course.
Thank you. Yeah, The Exorcist. Those were sort of the troika, the trilogy of motion pictures about demonology that sort of gave us an education. So that was one thing. one thing we found out that America and the world was really fascinated by demonology. We had a hunger for it, a thirst for it. And I think that maybe for years it's been pretty much just relegated to horror films, for teenagers. And then, with the, I guess, the 68 with Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist, we found out that this was mainstream. Everybody seemed to want to hear about this and learn about it. And this by the box office take. I mean, it was huge. So along coinciding with those motion pictures were Ed and Lorraine Warren. They were Roman Catholic demonologists from Monroe, Connecticut. They were the ambassadors of the Pioneer. They were as important to the realm of demonology as, say, maybe Sybil Leek was to the realm of witchcraft. In England and the UK, when they repealed that law that said that if you practice witchcraft, you could be imprisoned or probably put to death. I mean, God knows what the punishment was. But when they repealed that in the 50s, it was Sybil Leek that wrote a book about witchcraft. She called herself the world's most famous witch. And she was responsible for initiating the Coven of the Cata that was in Walpole, Pennsylvania, in my backyard, and with Dr. Frederick Santee, a white witch, the high priest for the Coven of the Cata. And he was a friend of mine. I knew Frederick Santee. But with Sybil Leek doing this, she told millions of people that it was okay to practice these ancient religions, these pre-Christian religions, whether it was Wicca or paganism. And of course, these religions did not worship the devil. They weren't about that at all, but they were pantheistic. They believed that God was in everything. So that was that. But Ed and Lorraine Warren did the same thing. And there were people that didn't like them. There were allegations that Ed had a mistress, a young mistress, and Lorraine turned the other cheek, turned and looked the other way. I mean, I don't know about that. I don't delve into it. That does nothing for their exploration and their accomplishments in the realm of demonology. So I don't care about that. I met them in 1988 when they were on tour, promoting The Haunted, and The Haunted was the book written by Robert Curran. With this, but when you look at this one, this is the reprinted version, and here you have Ed and Lorraine Warren at the top. And I'm sure they're at the top of Graveyard too. But most of the books, or all the books that were written by Ed and Lorraine, were written by ghost writers. So that was that. But there were the reasons that they were castigated was because of Ed's, rumor about him and his girlfriend. The other thing, they were popular and they were successful. And whenever you're successful, there'll be people that'll try to bring you down. There's a lot of jealousy, a lot of envy, a lot of professional territoriality and all that. So, that impacted on Ed and Lorraine as well. Some people felt that they were hiding behind their Roman Catholic faith and using these emblems and everything as a means of getting ahead, and that maybe they commercialized these things, perhaps much like Madonna commercialized the crucifix and on these liturgical images, the Catholic images. So there were a lot of things that a lot of people that didn't like them. I operate by the universal principle of the law of 90. 30% of the people are going to love your light. They're going to like what you represent, the positivity, the energy. And what they're going to do is they're going to help you succeed. They're going to open up doors. They're going to introduce you to people. So that's 30%. 30% are not going to like you. They dislike you for all the reasons. And a lot of this is just professional jealousy, that if somebody is doing well with their book sales or their tours, there's some people there of low self-esteem and low confidence that will just take their shots and try to bring them down. 30, and then the other 30 are the people that are dealing with their own stuff, their own issues. They don't have time to worry about Ed and Lorraine Warren. So again, I think in Ed and Lorraine's case, I think it was more than just 30% that disliked them. I think there were a lot of people that disliked them. Again, thought that perhaps they exaggerated some of their stories and their, the seances and the, the demons that they fought. I don't believe that. I met them in 1988 and we stayed friends. They walked me through the realms of demonology. They told me a lot about the Smurf Haunting that went into my 2025 book. And I consider them friends. And I know a lot of people don't like them, and I hear this all the time, but I do like them and I defend them and their honor. I'll say one thing. Lorraine wanted Annabelle and all those artifacts to stay locked up in the Warren Occult Museum in Monroe, Connecticut. And in 2025, they had the Devils on the Run tour, and they took Annabelle all over the land, New Orleans, San Antonio, the West Virginia Penitentiary, and Gettysburg. And I saw Annabelle on July 11th, 2025. I met Dan Rivera on that date, and that was on Friday. We agreed to do an intense interview on the Smurf Haunting. I told Dan that I was writing the book, and we were supposed to do the interview on Monday, the 14th, after he got back to Connecticut. I got a phone call that Dan died the day before.
Right.
So I'm assuming that I was one of the last paranormal researchers to talk to Dan Rivera before he died. And I have someplace in my book that there should be a picture right here of me and Dan Rivera. And there's Annabelle right in the middle. And Annabelle was in a wooden cage, about maybe 5 foot tall. It was infused with holy water and holy oil. Had the crucifixes on all 3 sides. It had the Lord's Prayer affixed to the back. And Father Bob was supposed to be there at all times doing blessings and rites of protection. When I was there, however, on Friday, July the 11th, Father Bob was not there. They said that Father Bob was down in South America. So I don't know about that, but that was it. There were a whole lot of us that paid $40 a person to see Annabelle. The Gettysburg, I think it was called the Gettysburg Connections, cited 1,260 people. So we're talking around $50,000 take for those 3 days. And when you incorporate that with San Antonio, New Orleans, West Virginia, and Gettysburg, 4 gigs, almost give or take $200,000, and then some, because they took Annabelle up to Maine and all over the place. Again, keep in mind that Lorraine Warren said to not take Annabelle out of the Warren Occult Museum, but they did. And why did they do that? I would think financial consideration. That was all about the finances. So,
how did these people end up with their collection? It seemed to me should have went to Ed's nephew, whose name I'm drawing a blank on right now.
It was his godson. That was Chris McKenna, I believe. And Chris is out there doing a lot of podcasts and talking about what he learned from Ed and Lorraine. Chris was there at the Smurf House in West Pittston in the 80s. But what happened was the remains, all the artifacts, went to Tony Spera, who was Judy Schmurl's husband. So Judy was the daughter, and Tony Spera was Ed and Lorraine's son-in-law. So he inherited this, and then decided to take Annabelle on the road. There were when Annabelle was in New Orleans, 3 things happened that were suspect. When 1 or 2 things happened, it might be coincidence, but it was 3 things. There was the jailbreak. 11 inmates from the New Orleans jail broke out. It was an inside job. Some of those guys were in there for homicide. The largest sugarcane plantation in Louisiana burned down. And then there was a fire at the voodoo queen, Marie Laveau's house. So 3.
I hadn't heard that one.
Yeah, there were 3 things that happened during Annabelle's visit. So again, the people I talked to from the Ghost City tours didn't believe that Annabelle had anything to do with it. They thought it was just a coincidence. That's fine. The coroner said that Dan Rivera died because he had cardiac issues and he died of a heart attack. That's fine too. But people like The psychic Vincent sisters said no. Annabelle was infused with demonic energy, and those energies wore down Dan Rivera and eventually killed him. Now, you take your pick. If you believe in the realm of the supernatural, if you believe in demonology, and as you said early on, about demons, and even with Father Martin's a hostage of the devil. I mean, we know there's power there. So, demonic power, demonic energy. So that works in many ways. And we know that temptation is the first step. Temptation, obsession, finally possession.
Right.
But I think that with Dan Rivera being the chief handler of Annabelle, I just think that over time, perhaps, something bad happened. Again, that's my belief.
Sure.
Not everybody subscribes to that, and that's fine.
Did anything happen at the orphanage you're aware of?
No, not that I was aware of. I mean, the orphanage was infamous for having a very, very wicked governess who had a place called the Pit. And she would have these young boys go in there and they would beat the orphans that were there, boys and girls. They were called the stick boys. They would have these sticks and they would just beat these kids. So it was a horrible, horrible thing. Some of the ghost hunting TV groups were there looking for her ghost, for her demon. So, they had spent the night there. But I hadn't heard anything about that. I'll tell you that when I went there, the ambiance was pretty powerful, with the music, with the purple lighting, with all this. I think there might have even been the fog machine, I forget. But I mean, it was really a great nuance. But it was great talking to Dan Rivera, talking about not demonology, but talking about the spirit of Christ, saying things like Dan Rivera, saying that the power of the devil is great, but the power of God is greater. And Dan Rivera was a former Methodist that converted to Catholicism, and he was walking on air. He was just so proud of his faith, and to talk about that. And I'll tell you, it's always empowering to get into a room with people that really have a strong faith and can discuss this in a common sense manner without being condescending and without trying to convert you over to their side. So Dan was all of that and more. He was a great guy. I enjoyed talking to him. I did take some flack from the New England Society for Psychic Research. These are the people that made the $200,000. And they said that I was exploiting his death and making money from his death. Now, I'll tell you, I'm still paying the VIG. I'm still paying my publisher for the Smurf Haunting when Ed and Lorraine came to town. But for anybody who's interested, it's a great book. And that's my picture of Ed and Lorraine Warren, right, in 1988 when I met them. So, yeah, when Ed and Lorraine came to town. So, and I think, Cody Sexton from Anxiety Press did this cover, and I think it's just awesome with the, so anyway.
Hey, just out of curiosity, where can people pick up that book? Amazon?
Yeah, well, you can. Yeah, certainly Amazon is the way to go. But if you'd rather deal with a a poor author who's just trying to make ends meet, contact me through my website, www.maximfruek.com, and look. And there's a way to communicate with me, and I could hook you up with an autographed copy of the book, and do it for a good price. So I tell everybody, Dan, that support local podcasters and authors and libraries and bookstores. Not these international conglomerates. Again, nothing personal to Jeff Bezos, but he's a billionaire. He doesn't need your $20 for the book, but I do. So that's the bottom line.
Sure.
I don't make any qualms about it. And again, too, if anybody's going to buy any of my books, please leave it. And talking about Amazon, please leave a review on Amazon, because it's something that really makes or breaks us. If you see a whole lot of reviews, that your book is getting attention and things are happening. So, that would be the one thing that I would suggest people do.
Now, as talking about getting attention for the book, you've got a movie, or there's a movie coming out, or did come out, based on one of your books?
Yeah, well, it wasn't based on my book, but actually it was. Conjuring Last Rites. First of all, with the horror franchise Conjuring, based on the career of Ed and Lorraine Warren, 9 motion pictures, including the Annabelle series and the Nun series, all together with this, The Conjuring.
Mm-hmm.
9 motion pictures worth $2.7 billion net. That's with an N, net. 2.7 billion.
Wow.
Conjuring Last Rites came out September 5th, 2025. And my book came out, I think it was 4 months before that. If I tell people that if you want to learn about the Smurf Haunting, read my book. If you want the authentic, realistic book, read my book. If you want to be entertained, go see Conjuring Last Rites. There was very little in Conjuring Last Rites, and I saw it twice, that was accurate. For example, they had Judy Warren as the protagonist. Judy Warren as the person who had the mark on her back and that the demon was stalking. That's not true. As far as I knew, no, Judy Warren and Tony Spira never stepped foot in the Schmerl house in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. Maybe later, after all this stuff happened in the 80s, maybe for the motion pictures, for publicity, but they were never there when any of this happened. But they wove Judy Warren into the story, and that became the story and the mirror. None of that happened. The only thing that was true about the Last Rites was the frenzy. It was a zoo. It was a circus. You had all the paparazzi and the rubberneckers and all these people. They're trying to find out what happened. The West Pittston is in my backyard. I'm originally from northeastern Pennsylvania. I'm in Florida right now, but when we were there, when that happened, I went up to West Pittston numerous times, took pictures, talked to the neighbors, just to gauge what was happening. I did not talk to Jack and Janet Schmerl because I knew they needed their space. Their story had already been told countless times on all these TV programs like Sally Jesse Raphael and all these, these shows of the day, decades ago. And so, but the Schmerls were under attack by demonic infestation. I didn't want to bother them. They were under attack by the paparazzi. Janet Schmerl talked about getting hundreds and hundreds of phone calls from international reporters who wanted exclusive interviews. I mean, they were being harassed to death. And then, of course, the neighbors, many of whom, it became a town without pity. Many of these neighbors who didn't believe Jack and Janet Schmerl and believed that their sin was they were trying to make money. And it always boils down to that. Ed and Lorraine Warren got blasted for the same thing. They're only in it for the money. I hope somebody says that Maxim Fruek's only in it for the money because, I'd like to have a conversation with you. We work hard to pay off our publishers, and if there's anything left over, fine, but we don't, nobody, I don't do it for the money. I do it for the love of writing and the research. I love being a paranormal writer and researcher, and that's what I do. And certainly if any of my books became a million seller, how great, that would be wonderful, but we don't bank on that. The chances of that are just so phenomenal. 1 in what, a trillion? People that hit it out of the park are few and far in between. Same thing with podcasts. Those that reach the high level of that commercial acclaim and accomplishment where everybody knows their name. It's hard to do because we are. There's so many people doing the same thing that we're doing. So.
But I don't bear any malice to Rogan or any of those guys. The guy who does the Y-Files, I watch religiously.
Oh, yeah, for sure, yeah.
But I don't bear them any malice. I'm glad they made it. So
exactly, yeah, and that's it. And again, applaud that. Respect them and celebrate that. It's a wonderful thing, rather than criticizing them because you're jealous, because you're coveting their success. That's not the right way to do. Let's show some compassion and kindness, especially in the paranormal realm, because we have enough bad guys and con artists out there already. So we don't need any
kidding.
more.
Max, I'm going to step away for a commercial break, and when I come back, I want to really get more into the Smurf Haunting itself.
Great, let's do that. Okay.
All right, I'll be right back, so stand by. All right, this guy is really down to earth, really here, like the Warrens, which, like I said, I read the books. I thought very highly of them. I've talked to people right here on the show that go a different direction than me, and that's fine. I'm not arguing, just, it always seemed to come out after death, though, and that bugs me. And here's something I want you to see before anything happens to you, God forbid, and I'll be right back.
The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from Unex Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to research a haunted house can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unxmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unxmedia.com or amazon.com.
Hey, friends, I want to remind you, too, about joining the Unex Network. The Unexplained Network caught me. I know I caught myself there. It is now the Unexplained Network. We went back to the original name, and we've got all new, well, not all new. I'm still here, and so is some of the others, but we got a whole bunch of brand new guests. We're getting more shows on per day. You can find us on YouTube, the Unexplained Network or Unex Network. You can find us on Rumble. And we are on all of the basic podcast spots. And there's so much. If you want to become a member, now all of our shows you can catch for free. But if you want to become a member, you jump on to onxnetwork.com, drop down on the front page, and right there you'll find where we have the way to join. And you get access to the blog. And as I've told you before, the blog lately has been going crazy. It's got, we were one of the leaders on the Tic Tac movement when that came out, the whole Tic Tac UFO Navy deal. Right there on conspiracy, on winged humanoids flying around the country. One was sighted over the Mississippi. A Mothman was seen trying to get into a high-rise hotel in Las Vegas. I mean, we got all kinds of stuff like that. And then, of course, other than the blog, we have the newsletter. And the newsletter more tells you about what the shows are going to be and what kind of guests we got, like Maxim here. It's awesome guests. And then the magazine. And the magazine comes out monthly. And these are just a couple of them. This one on the left, I had two stories in that one about the legends of Halloween, and the legends of Halloween I wrote about are not ghosts. It's legends of people putting razor blades in apples, poisoning the candy, things like that. I got down to where those rumors come from. They did have a grain of truth, but that's it. This other side, we have issues of specific themes, as well as there's always other stuff too, but that one was about time travel. I've got a story in this one on haunted dolls. It seems interesting we're talking about Annabelle, because I've hated dolls since the first time I saw the episode of The Twilight Zone with Chatty Cathy or whatever it was. Oh, got it. That turned me off on dolls. And this one here, The Last Call at the Devil's Diner. There was a restaurant outside of St. Louis on Old Route 66. I got to investigate it the night it closed for good. I've investigated it multiple times, come across some really nasty stuff. Demons? I don't think so. Some of the people I work with believes that. I don't. They were too easily dealt with. What I did see is a tornado hit it last May or March, about a year ago now, and destroyed the building. So there'll be no going back to that one. That's why I wrote the article. So there's a lot going on. Join up. And that's all I need to say right now, because I want to get back to Max and the Smurf Haunting. Max, what's the basis of that?
Well, demonic infestation. You've heard, Dan, you've heard about haunted houses. You're just we were talking about Margie Kay's How to Research a Haunted House thing. The Smurf Haunting was your typical haunted house. And in my book, The Smurf Haunting, when Ed and Lorraine came to town, I compare the West Pittston Smurf Haunting with Amityville, the Hinsdale House, the Damned Wells House, a number of them. Most of these haunted houses have the same tapestry, the same thing going on. You hear the sounds, there's the smells, there's the maybe the voices saying "get out." You might have the profanities etched in the mirror, the steam in the mirror. With the Smurf Haunting, though, it was different than the other ones. It was different than Amityville. And let's face it, Amityville is the most successful, most popular, most commercialized haunted house ever. But with the Smurf Haunting, it's the most, I think, violent one ever. Jack Smurf claimed that he was raped by a female demon, a succubus. And I believe this happened because of his Christian beliefs. He was a devout Catholic. And I believe that because of that, he had a mark on his back. Whenever I say this on podcasts, they immediately say, well, what about all the other people, all the other Catholics in West Pittston? And I don't know. I don't know how the devil operates. I don't know what's in the devil's head. I don't dance with the devil, and I don't want to. So all I know is that Jack and Janet claimed that she was sexually molested as well. Some of that was captured. A little bit of that was captured in Conjuring Last Rites, but that was the only thing that was factual. There's very little there. So I believe that what sets the Smurf Haunting apart from the other haunted houses was the level of violence, the intensity that happened there. Again, because the Smurfs were devout Christians. And I think they had a mark on their back. Another thing that happened too that was of interest, and this was also, I think the third thing that was a bit factual in Conjuring Last Rites, that the Smurfs had a collie dog named Simon. And Don Smurf, who was, I believe, 19 at the time, watched as the dog levitated and was thrown against the wall. So it was either demonic energies that did this, it could have been hallucinations on Don's part, or it could have been Don Smurf manifesting some sort of psychokinetic energies. And we know about this mainly from Stephen King and his foray into, psi energies. Typically, adolescent females that have this ability, and they can't harness it, they can't control it. But he's written about this in Carrie and Firestarter. We look at it in Shining, a whole lot of Stephen King's motion pictures, dealt with these kids that have the psychokinetic energies. And it's something that has been looked at places like Duke University that investigates, paranormal things. So I think that one possibility is that Dawn Smurf may have levitated that dog, that collie, by herself. Again, we'll never know. I did not reach out to the Smurfs. I had seen Dawn in a public setting. And again, I didn't go up to her and introduce myself and shake her hand. Again, I did this out of respect, for the Smurf family. So that's why I didn't do that. On the other hand, I do have a chapter called The Death of Dan Rivera. And before I did that, I had a long talk with my publisher and some of my associates to see if this was something that I should do. I didn't want to come across as being crass, or certainly I did not want to come across as being exploiting Dan's death. That was the last thing I wanted to do. But my publisher said, "Look, you were there. You were part of the story. It's the troika that you were there in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. That was your backyard. You knew Ed and Lorraine Warren. You became friends with them, and you were there. You met Dan Rivera 2 days before he died. So write about it. It's your story as well." They told me that I was a part of the story. Now, I was almost embedded in the story. And I like to think that maybe something flowed through me. Something was channeling through me to write this book. Because when I wrote it, it seemed to be easy. It just seemed to be writing itself. And it turned out to be a really, really good book. People that read the book tell me that they've learned so much about the realm of demonology and the rite of exorcism and, famous exorcists and all that. I mean, it captures all that using the Smurf Haunting as the epicenter. But the Smurf Haunting comes along in the book towards the middle because there's a beginning and an end, and the Smurf Haunting is just the way that I tell the story. So, but it worked out well. It was a wonderful literary device, and I was just so glad to have this book under my belt.
What did the Warrens and their investigators deal with when they went into the building?
Yeah, well, Jack said that the place. First of all, what happened was, I want to go back a little bit. Being devout Catholics, the Schmerls invited priests, the neighborhood priests, to come in there and spend the night, just to hear if he could hear anything. Had them come over and do a blessing. Had the one come over and do an exorcism. None of these were working. Janet Schmerl saw Lorraine Warren on a television program. So she reached out to them, and they were convinced that something was happening. They had a series of phone conversations, and Ed and Lorraine were convinced that something was happening. So they went down there. They must have spent maybe at least 4 times investigating the house. They came with a photographer and a nurse who was psychic. Again, the Warrens were very adept promoters. That's why they brought the photographer, and that's what they did. That's why they were successful. You could criticize them for that if you like, but that's what they did. Ed Warren was a sort of an amateur exorcist, and he tried to do that. He couldn't do it right. He couldn't get it done. He reached out for Father McKenna, Robert McKenna, from Monroe, Connecticut. Father McKenna performed 3 exorcisms on the Schmerl house, and again was not able to cleanse the house. At that point, the Archbishop of Scranton, the Scranton Diocese, Bishop Timlin, had permission to go outside of the state and get somebody else who was reputable, somebody who was able to go and get the job done. Excuse me. So they reached out to Father Alphonse Treble from New York State, and Father Treble came down to West Pittston, Pennsylvania. And the first exorcism that he did, he thought that there might have been subsidence. All these houses there in West Pittston pretty much were built on top of coal mines. So he thought there might have been a quake, subsidence there the first time. But then he was convinced there was something happening there. So he did a second, third, and fourth exorcism before he cleansed the house. That's the good news. The not so good news is that Father Treble also tried to cleanse the Hinsdale house, which is in western Pennsylvania. And that was the house that was occupied by the Dandy family. Father Treble was not able to go and cleanse the Hinsdale house. He told the Dandys to just leave. This house is cursed. It's a pathway to hell. Just take your belongings and leave. Don't tell anybody where you're going. Just leave. And he left that place alone. He thought it was a gateway to hell. What's interesting, at the Hinsdale house, you could spend a night there for about, I think it's like $150. You could spend the night there from 6 p.m. to say 10 a.m. And it's pay for play. And there's a lot of these haunted houses, these what's called dark tourism, where people are making money from people that would much rather deal with demonic, occult, fatalistic, scenarios. Going to see Alcatraz rather than going to see the Liberty Bell, things like that. So the Hinsdale house is still a popular entity, and people are going there. But like I said, Father Alphonse Treble was the hero of the Smurf Haunting. And but unfortunately, in the book The Haunted, which came out in 1988, his name isn't even mentioned, because this was published in 1988, and Father Treble didn't do his exorcisms until after that. So he got the job done, and he's just a wonderful individual. I was doing a presentation down here in Florida on the Smurf Haunting, and a lady raised her hand, and here she attended college where Father Treble taught. He had taught a course on parapsychology, and anyway, she said that he was a short guy. He was really funny, and in the classroom, he would leave empty seats at the front of the room for the ghosts. If they wanted to attend, they had the special seats. So that was Father Treble, but he had a sense of humor as he dealt with the demonic. And, you know, it must be interesting. I know, like with your, when you talked about the hostage to the devil, I mean, did Father Martin talk about anything that was really horrific, and anything that was maybe life-threatening, or any real sensationalistic things there? Do you recall?
Some, don't remember the exact cases, but yes, he did. And of course, now his death is attributed to demonology. Or
okay,
you know, he fell down some steps. They said he was pushed. I don't know, but.
And this, I don't think this is the Father Martin that had the chalk talk, right? The
no,
now okay, it was.
No,
okay,
I think that's a different.
Okay, he was.
Yeah,
he was infamous in the addictions game. Okay, yeah.
This one was big in the Exorcist cases.
Okay, yeah, very good. Okay, and with you know, what's interesting in my book, The Smurf Haunting, I talk about Father Amorth. Father Amorth was the Vatican's exorcist, and if you Dan, if you ever see that movie, The Vatican's Exorcist, with Russell Crowe.
I haven't seen it, but I know about it. Yeah,
it's wonderful. It sticks to the facts. It's about an infestation there in Spain, but Father Amorth had done thousands and thousands of exorcisms during his life. He claimed that only 2% are legitimate. He said that all the other 98% were mental illness, Tourette's syndrome, bipolar, schizophrenia, whatever. But only 2% of the folks that the Catholic Church deals with are actually possessed. And when we talk about possession, I mean, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about individuals, and you know, we learned some of this from The Exorcist, you know, Peter Blatty's wonderful, wonderful motion picture. But individuals that have superhuman strength, individuals that can speak ancient, archaic languages, individuals that can levitate, individuals that know your thoughts. If you're there in the room, you know, and you're, you know, fighting with your wife, or even with the Catholic priest and the exorcist having issues with his mother, you know, the demon knew this. So this is part of what they do. And a lot of this has been documented, you know, but it's the same thing, as well as, you know, how does a person become possessed? And we look at things like Ouija boards and seances. We look at curses. You know, we look at the what I believe. I mean, I don't know if anybody else talks about this. I believe that having a Christian faith, or perhaps a Jewish faith or a Muslim faith, you know, could open up doors to the demonic to try to get you and bring you down. So there's a lot of different ways that possession can occur, but typically it starts with temptation. And no matter how holy, pious, righteous, well-behaved, ethical we are, we're always at risk for temptation. Every one of us.
Max, I was ghost hunting. I started out in the late 70s. And I have only dealt with one case that might possibly be demonic, and I've got my doubts. Other people say it was. I say it had the earmarks of it, but it just seemed like they got rid of it too easily to be real. And I have dealt with human spirits who pretend to be demonic.
Yeah, okay.
So I think 2%'s high.
Okay, well, that's, you know, there was one exorcism in Germany that went bad. It was Anneliese Michael, 27-year-old college student, and her parents believed that she was possessed. So did the two priests. But after what was torturous, I mean, days and days of torture, and I think near starvation, she died. And the courts found Annaliese's parents and the two priests guilty of either homicide or accidental homicide or whatever. I don't know what they termed it, but they got them. And from that day on forward, exorcisms are not allowed to be performed in Germany. Maybe they are under the radar, you know, but not officially. So that was what resulted from that. But I mean, you know, we can't be too overzealous, and you know, I think some of these people that may be mentally ill may believe that they are possessed. So you know, it's a fine line. It's a very fine line, you know.
When the Smurf Haunting was happening, what did they see? You talked about the dog being levitated.
Yeah.
What else was it that they saw? Did they see the demon? Did they see its shadow or its anything like that?
They did, but these things that they saw happened incrementally, slowly at first, slowly. The pipes would bang. They had a brand new television set that blew up. There was a chandelier that fell and almost hit one of the girls. The voice that said "Get out." And then one thing that was really pretty bizarre. And Jack Schmerl was pretty good. He was a good handyman, but there were rooms there that were hooked up with the furnace that should have been warmed, had the warmth there, the hot air. But these rooms were maybe 30 degrees or 50 degrees. So there were these temperature inversions in certain rooms. So there was paint stains that he wasn't able to get up. I mean, just like all these things that were just bizarre. And they just kept on happening. And then with the sexual assault, that was the most violent. And also, we talk about demonic infestation with people, places, and things. We talked about Annabelle, but also I believe that the demon probably infested the Schmerl house, and also the people, because when the Schmerls went on a camping expedition, there were some demonic things that happened, and it seemed like the demon followed them there. So there's pretty much no rhyme or reason for how this works, why the Schmerls were the ones who were targeted, why it took so long, why the demon followed them to the campsite. It did stop when they left, but then again, Father Treebolt was there, and he had spent his time there doing the 4 exorcisms, driving the demon out.
Can you give more of an idea of what happened at the campsite?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. It was in the haunted, and I'm trying to think of some of the bizarre things that happened. It might have been missing things, weird things that would seem to indicate a paranormal presence.
Okay.
And again, I'm like you, Dan. I mean, I read a whole lot of stuff, and there's a lot of stuff in my head, and on a good day, I can conjure it up. So
watch that word.
Yeah. Yes. So anyway, but
while we're on the topic, we've been discussing it kind of on the side, but do you think the Amityville case was real?
Yeah, I think what happened was, well, first of all, the Butch DeFeo, that 23-year-old kid, crazy kid. He was a rich kid. He walked around with thousands of dollars in his pocket, a new car, and they lived in Amityville in a place that they bought called High Hopes. And it was in a very affluent part of town. Butch DeFeo, Ronnie DeFeo Jr. was on heroin. He was on methamphetamine, which is a horrible drug. And he was also on Thorazine. So he was probably being treated. Who knows why he went up there and with a rifle and shot his father twice, his mother twice, and killed his 2 sisters and 2 brothers. Here's the thing. He claimed that he was possessed by a demon. And the prosecution, and there's a wonderful book called High Hopes. And, I'm like you, I read Amityville Horror twice. I read High Hopes once, but I cited that in the Smurf Haunting. But the prosecution had to prove that Butch DeFeo was not possessed by a demon, but that he had a personality disorder, i.e., he needed instant gratification, and he had just a very violent temperament. He just couldn't, just the horrible things, and he needed to have things his way, and he had no compassion. They were able to prove that he was, mentally ill as far as being, having those antisocial tendencies, but not possessed by a demon. So that started it, and then it was Kathy and the people that bought the house, Lutz's, Kathy and George Lutz bought the house for $80,000. That was a great price. I mean, a wonderful price. They only stayed there for 28 days, because of a series of things like housefly infestations, the daughter talking to a little monkey or whatever it was,
A
all
pig, I
kinds
think.
of
Yeah.
a pig. Okay, a pig. Weird paranormal things that were happening there. After 28 days, they left. Now, I want to make this clear. There have been, after Jay Anston's Amityville Horror, and again, the book wasn't that good. Remember, I read it 2 times. It wasn't that good, mainly because he had George and Kathy Lutz transcribe their recollections with the Amityville onto a tape recorder. So Jay Anson had to go and transcribe 48 hours of tape recording into a book form, which he did. But they left after 28 days. There's been books and motion pictures about this. I mean, everybody has written a book about Amityville. The one, though, that stands out more than any other is Jay Anston's publisher, who claimed that over a couple bottles of beer, a couple of bottles of wine, they conjured up the Amityville Horror that with all the stuff that happened. And they claimed with this book that it was all a hoax. And that is the book that, bar none, that's the one that everybody talks about. I believe that book was a hoax. It was a moneymaker. They were there at the right time to perpetrate that fraud. But everybody believes it and they can't let it go. Rather than looking at the truth. Even when they went back out to California, George Lutz claimed that what happened really happened. So, I mean, you make your own decision. But I mean, I've read those books. I've watched those motion pictures. I mean, something happened there, and they didn't leave after 28 days after spending $80,000 for nothing. So, I think that there was something demonic happening there. But it was almost like Padre Pio. I think there's a good analogy there. Padre Pio was the mystic, Catholic mystic that had the stigmata. He suffered for the wounds of Christ. He had a church in Italy, and as he was preaching, thousands of people would come to see the stigmata. They were the rubberneckers. They wanted to see that. They came to have him hear his confession, and there were all these people. And so as Padre Pio is suffering, the Vatican did not believe him. They thought that he was a con artist, that on top of all the stuff that he was dealing, suffering for the Lord, that they believed that he was a con artist who was able to convince thousands of people of his delusions. So, I mean, it was almost like the Schmurls. I mean, they were dealing with the demonic infestation. They were dealing with the castigation from the media and the public. And I'll tell you what, as a journalist, I read every single thing I could in northeastern Pennsylvania about the Smurf Haunting in all the newspapers. I have clippings. I have file systems of those. Pretty much every single one was negative. Very few of those reporters believed. Let me kill this. Okay, that's good. Very few of those. Okay, very few of those journalists had any compassion for the Schmurls. They just joked about it. They talked about how Janet Schmurl went to the West Pittston Library to read up on demonology. And, I'm thinking, well, isn't this what you do? I mean, if you had been sexually abused, or if you're an alcoholic or a drug addict, wouldn't you go and read about this and find out what it's all about? Is there a fix? Is there a cure? Is there a resolution? So it didn't matter what the Schmurls did. They were hunted and castigated. The same thing happened to the Dandy family in Western Pennsylvania at the Hinsdale House. It was a town without pity. The townspeople claimed that the Dandies were devil worshippers and everything else. I mean, it was horrible, horrible, horrible. And you know what? Whenever there's somebody who's different, I mean, they're treated like freaks. They're not treated like children of God. And we see this time and time again. And what's
Max,
interesting too. Go ahead.
Do you think that people are that way because they're afraid of what's going on?
Well, that's one emotion That's one. I think so. Yeah, I think that maybe,
Afraid to admit this stuff is true.
that could be. That could be. Remember, we got a whole lot of human emotions. That could be one of them. That one is one of them. But it seems that whenever people are different, look at the little kids on a school ground. Are these wonderful little guardian angel, blessed children, little angels? No, they're like little monsters. If there's somebody that's different,
Yes.
true to form, these, kids, they pick and tease. It's horrible, but, not all of them, but a lot of them. Remember we were talking about Carrie, Stephen King's Carrie, when Carrie was having her menstrual cycle, the girls were chanting, she's bleeding, they're chanting, plug it up, plug it up, plug it up. And I remember the feminists said that, you could tell a male wrote this book because a female author wouldn't do that. And I disagree with that.
Yeah.
People and guys do it too, but girls could be very vicious and catty.
Yes.
So
that's
anyway,
for sure.
Whatever. It happened with the Dandy family and it happened with the Smurf family. And, human beings could be very, very, unspiritual,
That's for sure.
Which is sad.
Max, I've got to go. We are right on the cusp of shutting it down. So would you wait for a minute and let me get back and talk to you after the show?
Absolutely. Yep.
And thanks for coming on, folks. Once again, just real quickly, I do want to talk about the books that he's got out. And the main one we talked about tonight is the Smurf Haunting. And then, of course, there's Coal Region Hoodoo.
Yep.
Is that out of West Virginia or Tennessee?
No, it's the coal region of Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania, and western Pennsylvania, including the Chestnut Ridge. Western PA is the most bizarre place in America. I mean, it's crazy, but coal region Hoodoo is all about that. And
maybe we'll have to get you back and talk about that then.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
All right, so we got Lost Tribes of Bigfoot, Paranormal Apocalypse. There's a lot of great books here. And again, the Smurf Haunting. Guys, check them out. This is the stuff you love. That's why you're listening to me. All right, Max, thanks again. And I'll talk to you here in just a few minutes, okay?
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, listeners. I hope you enjoyed this.
I'm sure, because I sure did. All right, friends, I've already talked about the Onyx magazine, so I want to thank you all for coming. Sleep well tonight. Don't be too afraid. Remember, if you don't know what you're doing with a Ouija board, I'm not afraid of them myself, but if you don't know what you're doing, learn before you play with them. Same thing with any of that. Again, don't be afraid of the dark. There's nothing out there. And I guess most important of all, the thing I really want to make sure you understand is stay spooked. All right? Good night.